Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders to teach smug idiots lessons. And in today's episode, we've got nasty Karens ignoring doctor's orders, companies wasting thousands of dollars because they won't listen, and one OP tells a funny story about a phone call with a dead customer. Guys, the stories are so satisfying in this one. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and remember guys, this voice should only be on the Dark Fluff YouTube channel, nowhere else. Let's dive in. Here's some background. I did some service work on advertisement displays on gas stations, and working on gas stations is highly regulated. You also need to wear protective clothing, such as a high visibility vest, goggles, security boots, helmets, and you also have to secure your workplace. Securing a workplace is usually putting up a barrier around you where no one else is allowed. The certifications needed to do this work are boring as heck. It takes a whole weekend of my precious time, and it must be done once a year. If the oil company finds out that you didn't follow this protocol, you risk your contract. Our customer explicitly writes in every work order and sign-off sheet that this protocol has to be and was followed. We tech sign this. If we don't follow protocol, we're really screwed. So that said, let's get started. The day this happened, I was having a really bad day. The last call was somewhere remote, but from where I was, it would only take an hour to drive. From where I usually start, it would be more than 2 hours. The reported error was something that could be solved easily by rebooting a system, and frankly, we've never understood why this was an issue that needed an on-site visit from us, but the customer insisted. When this particular error happens, we usually go on site, suit up, and tell the manager what we need to do, and ask them to step a little to the side. In 9 out of 10 cases, the reboot button can be reached with a long screwdriver, so no ladder and no secure work area is needed. It takes less than 5 minutes. Confirming that everything works with the customer takes 10 minutes. This stretches the security protocol just a little bit, but we all agreed that this would be okay. Nobody would be endangered, and in this special case, everyone would benefit. So I call dispatch and I tell them at 3 p.m. that I would head out to this location. At 4 p.m., I could literally see the sign of the gas station up ahead. This is when my phone rings and I was informed that our customer ordered me to abort because, quote, today I only work until 4:30. Now, I tried to reason that this job would be done in less than 15 minutes, and that I already was on site. But no, the customer wanted to leave early today, and with that, I was furious. I actually drove home quite peeved at the situation. So as I arrived the next day, I did what every responsible tech would do. I assessed the situation and I found that one button that I needed to push was just out of reach, and thus I needed to set up a ladder. This meant I needed to set up a proper workplace. This meant, by the safety regulations, I needed to close down the registers. I informed the manager, and to my great surprise, the guy did not like this. Dispatch informs our customer of the situation. I was told to wait while they discussed the situation. An hour later, I had a nice chat with the manager and a really good coffee. The customer asked if I could do the work without securing my work zone. Naturally, I informed them that I'm a certified technician and that the security regulations are very clear about what has to be done. I also reminded them that it was in their work order and sign-off sheet that I and the local manager need to sign, that all security measures had been taken. They needed to discuss the matter a little more, so I got another coffee. An hour later, I was asked again to just do my work without closing down the registers. I reminded them of the security protocol, but I offered to do as they asked if they would send me this in writing. One coffee later, I was cleared to leave the site. Now, this could have been the end of it, but no. As this device still needed a reboot, I got a work order for it 2 days later, and lo and behold, the button was still just out of reach. Same game, same outcome. So instead of letting me do my job when I was already on site, they had to pay me an absurd amount for not doing my job because of a very strict security protocol that they insisted on. What a malicious compliance that was, and to think, if they had let OP do the 15-minute job instead of wanting to clock out on time, it wouldn't have cost them that much money in the end. And gotta love how OP repeated the compliance a second time. And if you think that was a lot of money for doing nothing, well, this next post, OP teaches their smug supervisor a lesson. This happened well over a decade ago, and I thought I'd share. I used to be a service technician who did scheduled calls to customers' homes. We generally had anywhere from 8 to 12 jobs a day as we were swamped. As one of the tech leads, I was also assigned jobs that most of the other techs had no training to fix. On this particular day, it began snowing and icing, and the road conditions began worsening. It was no issue normally, as long as I could avoid a few streets in town that have steep hills. I had a job in a newer area, and when I get to the neighborhood, I notice the house is at the bottom of a pretty steep hill on a dead-end street. I park at the top and I message my supervisor. I tell him that I would recommend we reschedule the job, as my truck would never make it back up the hill. Now, my supervisor must have been having a bad day or something, but the guy goes off on me and he demands I just do the job. The guy's screaming at me that I'm lazy and the road conditions weren't that bad. I took a photo of the hill and I sent it, but the guy still demanded I do the job. I would also note that my truck is vital to the work, and I could not have walked to the home due to the equipment in the truck that's required. So cue malicious compliance. I save the message and I send it to my personal account. Getting to the customer's home was no issue. I had them up and running in under 30 minutes. I followed my supervisor's demands and I did the job. But leaving was another issue. I couldn't get to the top of the hill with the truck, and I quickly gave up once I determined it was hopeless. So I call my supervisor back and I say, "Hey, I'm stuck at the bottom of a hill and I'm unable to get my truck up it. My other scheduled jobs will have to be reassigned and a tow truck called to get me out." My supervisor just responds, "Well, try harder. It's not that hard to drive on icy conditions." I respond, "At this point, I feel it's unsafe to do so, as I feel I could damage the homeowner's property. See prior messages about the hill being too steep and my request to it being rescheduled being denied." This is when my supervisor calls me, and I confirm I won't attempt to further climb the hill. He grumbles, but he knows me enough not to push me, so he tells me to hang on. I wait 45 minutes, and the guy shows up in his work truck, which is much smaller and lighter than mine. He doesn't even attempt to go down the hill, but walks. He tries for a while to get my truck up himself, but then accidentally hits a mailbox. He then gives up and he calls a tow truck. With wintry conditions, I have to wait another 3 hours for a truck to arrive. When they do arrive, they also get stuck at the bottom of the hill, and I'm not even sure why they even tried going down it. Now me and a tow truck are stuck at the bottom of the hill, and this time the wait's even longer. They needed to bring in a specialty truck, which turns out doesn't have a long enough chain to reach us at the bottom of the hill, so we have to wait even longer for a third tow truck to arrive. Overall, I arrive at the customer's home around 9:30 a.m., and I finish the job at 10 a.m. I don't get up the hill until 7 p.m. For 9 whole hours, I was at the bottom of the hill with my truck running while I just played games on my laptop. Instead of working in the wintry conditions outside, I was nice and toasty in the cab. What a story that was, guys, and I just love how it was such a big "I told you so" moment for OP. And I seriously hope OP's supervisor learned a lesson that day and never doubted OP again. Like, it's just so satisfying when smug bosses ignore the experienced workers, only to immediately discover the worker was right the entire time. Some months after my mom sold the home and downsized, I got a letter from a debt collection agency saying that I owed them £134 and some pence, including interest and fees. I had no idea what this was for, so I phoned them. I find out it's for the broadband service at my mom's old house, which is now sold, which had been cancelled a short time before she moved, along with the attached phone line. I explain that there must have been a mistake, as the phone line and broadband were all in one package, and I had cancelled it all together at the same time since the house was sold. The query went back to the supplier. They called me and they said they'd been unable to cancel the broadband part of the service because the cancellation had not come in from the account holder. And I just said to them, but I was the account holder. In which they responded, no, the account holder is actually my father's name. I explain that there really must have been a mix-up as my father died a few years earlier, and I took control of the telephone line and broadband account, paying that single bill for my mother. They insisted they had to speak with the account holder, and they could no longer speak with me on the matter, and they refused to speak with me again. Despite all the collection letters and threats of legal action being taken against me, not my deceased dad. They wouldn't take no for an answer, so I drove to my dad's grave and phoned them up. And I said, hey, the account holder's here. You can speak to him if you want. I then left the mobile phone by the gravestone while I wandered around the quiet and pretty churchyard. I of course hear some pretty irate voices at the end of the line, so I pick up the phone and I asked if they had any joy speaking with the account holder. An angry voice asked what's going on, so I explained where I was and that I'd love to know if my dad said anything to them, since I'd been unable to reach him under the 6 feet of churchyard dirt since we buried him a couple of years earlier. There was of course silence at the end of the phone. I was then passed to a manager who apologized profusely, and they said they would sort it out on their end. A month or so later, the debt collection agency sends me a letter saying the matter had been resolved with no balance owing. So here's a tiny bit of pertinent information. In 2014, I had a C-section to bring my son into the world. I was let go from my previous job because they didn't want the liability if something happened to a pregnant woman on the job. I was rehired by a fast food company where I held my very first job, which is not McDonald's. It's a bit higher priced than that, where you could get fried chicken, a hot dog, and a double cheeseburger at the same time. Also, there will be no mention of my child's father because he wasn't there for us. I lived with my eldest sister, who is more like a mom to me, which is why she's mentioned in the story. She was the person I had with me when I had my C-section, and she's been the one there for my son every moment of his life. My doctor said if I was going back to work before his recommended 4 to 6 weeks of healing time and rest, that I had to be on light duty, and that I was not to lift more than the weight of my son, which was 6 pounds. So all that said, here's the story. I was rehired by a fast food company that was always extremely busy at each major point in the day. Lunch made over $800 between noon and 1, and dinner made over $700 from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Of note, the only reason I was rehired was because the hiring manager loved me to pieces. When I left the first time, she told me I always had a job with her because she loved my work ethic. She said I was the best worker she'd had in years. I was told nobody ever picked up extra shifts as quickly as I did, and nobody cared to learn as fast as I did. So since I had previous experience, they wanted me to work lunch rush, but I begged them to let me work dinner. Working dinner would allow me to spend quality time with my newborn, and my sister, who I lived with, would be home from her job to take care of my son while I worked. Now, I started a month after my C-section, right? Wrong. I started 2.5 weeks later. If I didn't, I couldn't be hired. I had actually gone back to my doctor and I asked his office to write a full letter explaining my light duty requirements, and I took it with me on my first day back. I walk into the manager's office expecting to see my hiring manager, or at least a manager I recognized, but no, enter in stupid manager. She had worked as an hourly employee at another location and she thought she knew better than everyone. I handed stupid manager my doctor's note and she looked at it like she was holding a dirty baby diaper. I asked her to make sure the hiring manager sees it and she doesn't respond. I just shrug it off and I walk back to where the break room was. I saw that all of my coworkers were the same from the last time I worked there, and they all crowded around me to see baby photos. I was crying the entire time because it felt like a homecoming. It felt like I was finally surrounded by a support system. That is, until stupid manager screamed that we all needed to get back to work when there wasn't even a customer. We all scattered like flies and we made ourselves look busy. I'd kept my phone in my pocket before clocking in, and I periodically checked it, always between customers, to make sure nothing happened to my son while I was gone. Now, I would think that most, maybe not all managers would have understood that I hadn't been texting, just quickly checking for new notifications. But not stupid manager. She hated it. She had been sitting in the office, checking the cameras, and I suppose I checked my phone one too many times. She comes flying around the corner at light speed, and she screams at me saying, "Hey, what the F do you think you're doing? You can't be on the phone while you're clocked in. You should know this already." Now, I'd never been one to deal well with being yelled at, so I just said, "I'm sorry." Some of my coworkers stood up for me, which again made me cry. Stupid manager apparently hated my crying too. She turns back to me and she screams, "What the F are you crying about now? Just go back to work." Thankfully, a customer walks in, so she just storms off. And let me tell you, I saw red. Within the hour, I watched her start to get ready to leave her shift, which I thought was a blessing, but of course it wasn't. Enter lazy manager, who I'd had issues with the last time I worked there. Not that I said anything, she just never worked. She also sat in the office, just staring at the cameras, and she was constantly snacking on food from the line, which the company said is illegal. You don't get free food, you get a discount on food. But did she ever pay for it? Not once. She just wrote it off as part of the end of the day throwaway food. Lazy manager sees me and her face fell. She just said, "Oh, hey, OP." I put on the sweetest smile and then she attempted to make small talk with stupid manager. But they made one major mistake. They left the door cracked, and wouldn't you know it, I worked on the side of the line closest to the door where I could hear everything. And this is how it went. Lazy manager says, "I thought hiring manager told her no." Stupid manager says, "I guess not. She's been on her phone all day. What a useless worker." Lazy manager then says, "Of course she has. She's the worst employee we've ever had. Ugh, I'll call hiring manager and figure this out. I've never disliked someone like I dislike her." This is when I hear stupid manager say, "She seems pretty lazy. Oh hey, look. Here's her pitiful doctor's note. I can't lift heavy because I just had a baby." Cue them both laughing, and lazy manager says, "We'll see how that works. It's not like we've never had kids before. We worked fine after." Hearing her say that fully pissed me off, but I bit my tongue. I waited for what I knew was coming. I knew exactly what I was gonna do because I was just plain sick of being bad-mouthed by them. Stupid manager leaves and lazy manager calls me to the office. I was in the middle of making an order, but she's the manager after all. I left that poor person's order sitting right on the line and I walked to the office and I said, "Yes?" She doesn't even look up from the computer and she says, "Hey, so what's this doctor's note all about?" I just take my phone out of my pocket to try to show her pictures of my son. And she just says, "Oh, you had a kid," in a tone that implied that nobody would want to be with me or something. I just smile sweetly and I nod, a plan working itself out in my head. Fast forward 4 days, and lazy manager hasn't been helping us close at all. I've been getting home after 2 a.m. every day from a place that closes at 10 on weekdays and 11 on weekends. At this point, I'm done. My sister can't keep taking care of my baby like this, and it's completely unfair. Lazy manager's working again, and we're really busy. I go to put the fries in the fryer because our fry cook's busy making chicken tenders. I open the little freezer beside the fryers and it's empty, which I knew it would be because I never saw anyone put a new box in. I just thought, oh, that sucks. So I say, hey, we're out of fries here. No response. I then yell again and say, hey, coworkers, fry cook's busy and we need fries out here. And I heard nothing in response. I thought, that's odd. So I yell out and say, hey, lazy manager, we need fries out here. Lazy manager opens the office door and she screams, get them yourself. It's your job. It's at that point I walk to the office and I say, lazy manager, I can't. My doctor said I can't lift more than 6 pounds. Lazy manager rolls her eyes and she looks right at me and she says, look, you can go get the damn fries out of the freezer right now, or you don't have a job anymore. 2 boxes. I don't care about this whole my doctor said this crap. Do it. And you need to stay the hell off your phone. And there it was, my opportunity for malicious compliance. So I walk into the freezer and I look at the box of French fries. I thought to myself, I really shouldn't. This could be detrimental to my health according to my doctor, but lazy manager said so. Now, I'd noticed that morning that a couple of my stitches hadn't started dissolving yet. So I called in and I scheduled an appointment about 2 weeks early. This was all lining up perfectly. I grabbed that fry box on the bottom shelf and I shifted it where I could read its weight. I wasn't supposed to be on my phone, but she obviously couldn't see me in the freezer. I snap a picture of the box. I then sent it to my sister with a message that said, so manager told me I have no choice but to do this myself. She doesn't believe my doctor's note at all. Can't respond. She won't let me use my phone anymore either. I made sure the message was sent and then switched off my phone. I grabbed that fry box and lifted it and I carried it to the little freezer 20 feet away. I'll say one thing, for adrenaline, it definitely works to numb the pain until it wears off. I then feel a wetness in my pants and I excuse myself to the break room, not to the bathroom. That was too private for this. I then turned where the cameras couldn't see me and I looked at my pants and I saw blood. I was bleeding because, that's right, the stitches hadn't started healing yet. But there was also another pain I'd never experienced. I walk up to lazy manager with a napkin covered in blood because of course I tried to stop the bleeding. I was immediately sent home to my sister who was in a severe panic over the message. I then called my doctor's office and I explained the situation, and I was scheduled for the following day. I was also told to go to the hospital if the bleeding continued. My sister and I bandaged me up to the best of our ability, and I wait for my appointment. When my doctor found out why I still picked up that fry box, he sounded more like a concerned father figure when he said, I'll handle it. But I assured him I had it myself. All I needed from him was a doctor's note. You see, I'd found out that the hiring manager, who is also the store manager, who is lined up to become district manager, had come back from vacation. She was actually scheduled for the following day, and I was supposed to work. The next day, I put on a show, and I painfully waddled into that store in full uniform, with my doctor's note clutched in one hand and the other hand grabbing every solid surface it could to absorb some of the shock of the movement. She takes one look at me and she guided me to a chair in the break room. With concern written all over her face, she said, "What happened?" So I tell her everything. She asked me if I ever gave either manager a doctor's note, and I said I had. She couldn't find it, but she didn't need to. What lazy manager and my stupid manager didn't know was that my sister had a printer that could scan documents, and we had a weird feeling that we would need a copy of the first doctor's note. So not only did I have a new note clutched in my hand, but stapled to it was a copy of the original note that told the managers that I was supposed to be on light duty because if I ripped off a stitch, it would lengthen my healing process. The new note explained that since I wasn't given light duty, I not only ripped a stitch, but I pulled a few muscles in my lower body. When hiring manager read both notes, she was furious. She checked the schedule, and when she saw that neither of the other managers were working, she called them both in for a meeting. She asked me if I would stay for said meeting, and I said yes. I took that seat, and I waited for the show. 30 minutes later, the hiring manager was giving both of them an earful. She was telling them that they had no right to disregard doctor's orders, and they never should have told me to stop being on my phone. Turns out, hiring manager had worked for this establishment when she had her youngest kid, so she knew the anxiety of being away from a newborn for too long. I watched stupid manager get fired on the spot, but not lazy manager. The lazy manager was demoted to line cook because hiring manager told her that she needed to relearn some humility. She worked as a line cook at another store for about a month, and then she was fired for stealing food. What a post that was, guys, and honestly, this story genuinely makes my blood boil. Not only that, but I honestly think that OP could have taken this all the way to court and won because what they did was super duper illegal. Like, imagine ignoring a doctor's note because you're a nasty, spiteful human being on a power trip. Again, OP had all the evidence they needed to go scorched earth on this place, and they do pop into the comments to address some things. OP says, number 1, when I first posted this, some people were wondering why I didn't sue the company. First, it didn't cross my mind because I'd never been through something like that. Second, when it was brought up to me by my best friend, my sister said it wasn't worth it for some reason. And third, I was more worried about the immediate need to provide diapers and formula for my son. Number 2, if you're curious, hiring manager found alternative ways for me to work. She gave me a comfortable stool to sit at, and she trained me on the cash register. I got to sit there and take orders instead of walking around while going through another 2 months of healing. She also helped me get to the restroom every time I needed to go. And she gave me extra break time, and if she couldn't help me, she made sure someone else could. Maybe it was so she wouldn't have to worry about a lawsuit, but part of me thinks it's because she cared about me like a mother figure would, well before I had my son. And lastly, my son and I are doing great. I healed amazingly well. And yes, I knew my stitches weren't healed, and yes, my logical brain said, this is bad, don't hurt yourself for these people, but I also didn't realize that I would actually rip the stitches out of my body, nor that I could tear muscles that easily after a major surgery. I didn't ask, and the doctor didn't tell, and my sister didn't know either. Thanks for reading my story. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r /MaliciousCompliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled People episode, where psycho Karens think they run the store, and it absolutely backfires so hard on them. Go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.